The special task force that Colonel Bradford had assigned Sarah to was officially called the Joint Expeditionary Support Unit. Unofficially, everyone called it the testing ground. It was 2010, and the military was slowly, grudgingly beginning to acknowledge that women were already fighting in combat. They just weren't getting credit for it. The task force was an experiment, a way to see how far they could push the boundaries before the official policies changed. Sarah arrived at the unit's base in Virginia to find that she was one of only 3 women among 40 soldiers. The mission was vague: conduct specialized operations in support of regular forces. In practice, it meant they were being trained for everything from direct action raids to sensitive intelligence gathering. The training was brutal. They ran miles every morning in full gear. They practiced room clearing, hostage rescue, combat medicine, and survival skills. They were pushed to their absolute limits, physically and mentally. Many of the men resented the presence of women. They made their feelings known through cold shoulders, dismissive comments, and deliberate exclusion from informal gatherings where important information was often shared. But Sarah had dealt with resentment before. She kept her head down and her performance high. The unit commander was a gruff Army major named Frank Dawson. He was in his late 40s, a veteran of multiple wars, and he had a reputation for being absolutely fair but completely unforgiving of weakness. 3 months into training, Dawson called Sarah into his office. "Mitchell, you're keeping up with the men physically, your tactical skills are sharp, and your mission planning is among the best in the unit." "Thank you, sir. But you have a problem." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Sir, you don't trust anyone. You work alone, you don't ask for help, and you haven't bonded with your team. In special operations, that will get you killed." He was right. Sarah had been so focused on proving she could do everything herself that she had isolated herself. "In 2 weeks, we're doing a major training exercise," Dawson continued. "You'll be team leader for one of the squads. Your performance will determine whether you stay in this unit or get reassigned. Learn to trust your people, Mitchell. That's an order." The training exercise was designed to simulate a hostage rescue in an urban environment. Sarah's team consisted of 5 other soldiers, all men, none of whom seemed thrilled to be led by her. The biggest skeptic was Sergeant First Class Mike Torres, a combat veteran with 3 deployments and an attitude problem. "No offense, ma'am," he said during their first planning session, "but I've been doing this for 10 years. Maybe you should let me take lead on the tactical approach." Sarah looked at him steadily. "I understand you have more experience, Sergeant. That's exactly why I need your input. Talk me through what you think the approach should be." Torres blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "You want my opinion." "I want everyone's opinion. We're a team. I might be the leader, but I'm not stupid enough to think I know everything." Something shifted in the room. The other soldiers exchanged glances. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah did something she had never done before. She let people in. She asked for advice. She admitted when she didn't know something. She listened. And slowly, the team came together. The day of the exercise arrived. They were given a scenario: hostages held in a 3-story building, unknown number of enemies, limited time before the hostages would be executed. Sarah's team approached the problem carefully. They gathered intelligence, developed a plan, assigned roles based on each person's strengths. Torres would lead the breach team. Sarah would coordinate from a position where she could see the whole building and adjust the plan as needed. When they executed the mission, it wasn't perfect. They made mistakes, but they adapted, communicated, and worked as a unit. They completed the mission with 0 casualties and all hostages rescued. Major Dawson's feedback was simple: "That's how it's done." From that point on, Sarah was no longer just accepted in the unit. She was respected. Over the next 3 years, Sarah deployed multiple times with the task force: Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places that were never officially acknowledged. She led missions, saved lives, and earned decorations for valor. She also earned her call sign, Elite. It started as a joke. After one particularly successful mission, Torres had raised his coffee cup in a mock toast and said, "To Lieutenant Elite, who keeps proving she's better than us regular folks." But the name stuck, and over time it stopped being a joke and started being a mark of respect. In 2013, the Department of Defense officially lifted the combat exclusion policy. Women could now serve in infantry and special operations. For Sarah, it was validation of everything she had fought for, but it also meant new challenges. She was promoted to captain and given command of her own special operations team. She was one of the first women to hold such a position. The scrutiny was intense. Every decision she made was examined. Every mistake was magnified. The pressure was crushing. During a deployment to Syria in 2014, Sarah's team was tasked with a mission to rescue aid workers who had been kidnapped by a terrorist group. The intelligence was time-sensitive. They had to move fast. Sarah made the call to launch the mission with limited reconnaissance. It was a calculated risk. They hit the target compound at midnight. The mission went smoothly at first. They found the hostages and were beginning the extraction when everything went wrong. The compound was booby-trapped. An explosion tore through the building, collapsing part of the structure. 2 of Sarah's soldiers were caught in the collapse. The hostages were screaming. Enemy fighters were converging on their position. Sarah had seconds to make a choice: pull back and save most of the team, or push forward and try to save everyone. She chose to push forward. In the chaos that followed, Sarah pulled one of her trapped soldiers from the rubble with her bare hands, even as bullets snapped through the air around her. Sergeant Torres, who had become one of her closest friends and most trusted teammates, provided covering fire while she worked. They got everyone out, barely. But Torres was hit during the extraction, a bullet to the chest. Sarah held pressure on the wound during the helicopter ride back to base, his blood soaking her uniform, his eyes locked on hers. "You came back for us," he whispered. "You didn't leave us." "Never," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I will never leave you behind." Torres survived, but he would never serve in combat again. The injury ended his career. Sarah was awarded the Silver Star for her actions that night, but the medal felt heavy with the weight of what it had cost. She visited Torres at the hospital every day during his recovery. "You saved my life," he told her. "You've saved mine more times than I can count," she replied. "I'm sorry I ever doubted you back at the beginning," Torres said. "You're the best officer I ever served under, the best soldier I ever knew. Gender doesn't have a damn thing to do with it." Those words meant more to Sarah than any medal ever could. But the scars from that mission, both physical and mental, stayed with her. Over the next few years, Sarah continued to serve, continued to lead, continued to prove herself again and again. She was promoted to major. Her reputation grew. The call sign Elite became known throughout the special operations community. She also continued to face skepticism and bias, especially from people who didn't know her, people who saw her gender before they saw her record. People like Captain Brennan. As Sarah sat in the coffee shop at Oak Ridge, finally drinking the cup of coffee she had been trying to get all morning, she thought about how many Captain Brennans she had encountered over the years. Some had learned like he seemed willing to, others never did. She had long ago stopped trying to change everyone's mind. She just did her job, led her soldiers, and completed her missions. But the encounter in the parking lot had stirred up old feelings, old frustrations, and it had reminded her of the price she had paid to get where she was. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo that she kept but rarely looked at. It showed her team from that Syria mission, taken just days before the rescue operation. All of them smiling, confident, ready for anything. 3 of the people in that photo were no longer in the military. 2 because of injuries sustained on missions under her command. 1 who had been killed in action 2 years later. The weight of leadership was something Sarah carried every day, every decision, every life that depended on her. As she looked at the photo, Sarah didn't notice the person watching her from across the coffee shop. Someone who recognized her, but unlike Captain Brennan, someone who knew exactly who she was and what she represented. Someone who had been waiting for a chance to speak with the legendary Major Elite. The woman who approached Sarah's table was in her mid-20s, wearing civilian clothes but with a bearing that marked her as military. Her brown hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and there was a nervous determination in her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," the young woman said, her voice slightly shaky. "Are you Major Mitchell?" Sarah looked up from her phone, slipping it back into her pocket. "I am." "I'm sorry to bother you during your time off, but—" the woman hesitated. My name is Second Lieutenant Jessica Park. I'm new to the base. I saw what happened in the parking lot and I wanted to thank you. Sarah gestured to the empty chair across from her. Please sit down. Jessica sat looking relieved and nervous in equal measure. I've heard stories about you, about Major Elite. I thought they were exaggerated, you know? The kind of legends people tell, but you're real. Very real, Sarah said with a slight smile. Though I promise the stories are probably exaggerated. I don't think so, Jessica said quietly. She took a breath. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you keep going? When people doubted you, when they didn't think you belonged, how did you not just give up? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah could see the pain behind it, the personal experience that prompted it. Are you facing that now? Sarah asked gently. Jessica's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. I graduated top of my class at West Point. I qualified for infantry officer basic course. I passed everything they threw at me. But now that I'm here at my first duty station, she paused. My platoon doesn't trust me. They think I'm a diversity checkbox. My company commander keeps giving me administrative tasks instead of real leadership opportunities. And yesterday, one of my NCOs told me to my face that women don't belong in combat arms. Sarah felt a familiar anger stirring in her chest. After all these years, after all the progress, young women were still fighting the same battles she had fought. What did you say to him? Sarah asked. Nothing, Jessica admitted, her voice breaking. I didn't know what to say, and now I feel like I proved him right, like I'm weak. You're not weak, Sarah said firmly. You're human, and you're dealing with something that no one should have to deal with. She leaned forward. But I'm going to tell you the truth, Lieutenant Park. It doesn't get easier. People will always doubt you. They'll always look for reasons to dismiss you. You'll have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Jessica's face fell. But here's what else is true, Sarah continued. You are good enough. You did earn your place. And eventually, if you keep showing up and doing the work, the right people will see it. The soldiers who matter will respect you, and you'll build a career that means something. How long did it take for you? Jessica asked. Sarah thought about that question. I'm still waiting for some people to see it, but the ones who matter, the soldiers I've led, the teams I've served with, they saw it when it counted. They talked for another hour. Sarah shared stories from her own journey, both the triumphs and the failures. She talked about the mistakes she had made, the lessons she had learned, and the people who had helped her along the way. The captain out there, Brennan, Jessica said at one point. Are you really not going to pursue charges against him? No, Sarah said. He made a mistake based on ignorance and assumptions, but he apologized, and I believe he'll learn from it. Destroying his career wouldn't serve any purpose. You're more forgiving than I would be, Jessica said. I've learned that carrying anger is exhausting, Sarah replied. Save your energy for the fights that matter. When they finally parted, Jessica looked different. Still nervous, still facing an uphill battle, but with something new in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or determination. Sarah watched her leave, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just satisfaction at helping someone, but a sense of purpose beyond the next mission. She was gathering her things to leave when her phone rang. The number was from the base headquarters. Major Mitchell, she answered. Ma'am, this is Corporal Jenkins from Colonel Hayes' office. The colonel would like to see you at your earliest convenience. Sarah glanced at her watch. So much for a day off. I can be there in 15 minutes. Thank you, ma'am. Sarah drove to the headquarters building, wondering what this was about. She hoped Hayes wasn't planning some official action against Brennan despite her wishes. That would just make the whole situation worse. But when she entered Hayes' office, she found him sitting with another officer she didn't recognize. The man was older, probably in his late 50s, wearing army dress blues with stars on his shoulders. A general. Sarah snapped to attention and saluted. At ease, Major, the general said, returning the salute. Please sit down. Sarah sat, now very curious and slightly concerned. Major Mitchell, this is Lieutenant General Richard Carver, Hayes said. He came to the base specifically to speak with you. Carver leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with sharp, intelligent eyes. I've been reading your file, Major. It's quite impressive. Multiple combat deployments, numerous decorations, exceptional leadership evaluations. Thank you, sir, Sarah said cautiously. I'm here because I'm overseeing a new program, Carver continued. We're establishing a specialized training center that will focus on integrating women into special operations and combat roles more effectively. The military has officially opened these positions, but let's be honest, the actual integration has been rocky. Sarah nodded. That was an understatement. We need the right person to help lead this initiative, Carver said. Someone who has walked the walk, someone who understands both the tactical requirements and the cultural challenges. Your name came up repeatedly. Sarah's mind was racing. Sir, what exactly would this position entail? You would be one of the senior instructors and program developers, Carver explained. You'd help design training protocols, mentor junior officers and enlisted personnel, and serve as a liaison between Special Operations Command and conventional forces. It's a high-profile position, challenging but with the potential for real impact. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind of position that could influence the entire future of women in the military. But it was also a desk job. No more direct operations, no more leading teams in the field. Sir, I appreciate the consideration, Sarah said slowly. But I'm an operational officer. I lead from the front. I'm not sure I'm the right person for a training and development position. Carver smiled slightly. I thought you might say that. Let me be blunt, Major. You're 38 years old. You've had an extraordinary combat career. But how much longer can you maintain the operational tempo? Another 5 years? 10 if you're lucky. The words stung because they were true. Sarah could feel it in her body already, the accumulated injuries, the wear and tear of years of hard use. She was still capable, still effective, but time was undefeated. This position would allow you to serve for many more years, Carver continued. And more importantly, it would allow you to multiply your impact. Instead of leading one team, you could shape the development of hundreds or thousands of soldiers. You could help create the culture and standards that the next generation will inherit. Sarah thought of Lieutenant Jessica Park, young, talented, facing the same obstacles Sarah had faced 20 years ago. What if Sarah could help change that? What if she could use her experience not just to lead missions, but to transform the system itself? Sir, I need time to think about this, Sarah said. Of course, Carver replied. Take a week, but I hope you'll seriously consider it. The military needs more leaders like you in positions where they can affect real change. After the meeting ended and Sarah left the headquarters building, her mind was spinning. She drove aimlessly around the base, trying to process everything. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized immediately, even though she hadn't seen it in months. Tors, she answered. How are you? I'm good, Captain. Sorry, Major. I still forget you outrank me now, Tors said with a laugh. Sarah could hear background noise, kids playing. Tors had retired from the military and was now teaching high school and raising his 3 children. You can call me Sarah when I'm not in uniform, she said. I heard about what happened at the base today, Tors said. The story is already making the rounds on social media. Some young captain who tried to challenge you and got schooled. News travels fast, Sarah said dryly. You're a legend, of course it travels fast, Tors paused. But that's not why I called. I wanted to check on you. I know these encounters bring up old stuff. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude. Tors knew her well enough to understand that, beneath her calm exterior, these incidents affected her more than she let on. I'm okay, she said. Actually, I just got offered a new position, training and development for women in special operations. That's huge, Tors said. Are you going to take it? I don't know. It means giving up operational work. Sarah, you've done more than your share of operational work. You've bled for this country. You've earned the right to step back and let someone else carry the load for a while. But what if I'm not done yet? Sarah asked quietly. Then you're not done. But ask yourself this. What serves the greater good? You leading one more mission, or you shaping the future so that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles you did? Sarah was quiet, letting his words sink in. Think about it, Tors said. And whatever you decide, you know I've got your back. After they hung up, Sarah finally headed home. Her house was small, neat, and felt empty after weeks away. She poured herself a glass of water and stood looking at the photos on her wall. Her commissioning ceremony, her first team photo, receiving her silver star, graduation from Ranger School, Tors and the others from that Syria mission. A life lived in service, in sacrifice. But what came next? As the sun set, Sarah made a decision. But before she could move forward, she needed to face one more thing from the past. She needed to make a visit she had been putting off for far too long. The military cemetery was quiet on Sunday morning. Sarah walked slowly along the paths between headstones, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. She stopped at a grave marker that read, Captain David Chen, United States Army Special Forces, beloved son, brother, and soldier. Sarah knelt and placed the flowers at the base of the stone. Hi, David, she said softly. Sorry it's been so long. Captain Chen had been the Special Forces officer who had first given Sarah a chance, back in Iraq all those years ago. The one who had seen her potential when others saw only limitations. He had been killed in action in 2015, leading a mission in Afghanistan. Sarah had been on a different deployment when she got the news. She had never properly said goodbye. I should have visited sooner, Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. I kept telling myself I was too busy, too many missions, but the truth is I didn't want to face it, didn't want to accept that you were really gone. The morning breeze rustled through the trees surrounding the cemetery. Something happened yesterday that made me think of you, Sarah said. A young captain who didn't think women belonged in the military. He reminded me that even after all these years, some people still don't get it, and I wondered what you would tell me to do. She paused, tears sliding down her cheeks. I think you'd tell me that changing one mind at a time isn't enough, that I need to think bigger, and you'd be right like you usually were. Sarah sat down in the grass, not caring about her civilian clothes getting dirty. I've been offered a position that could help change things on a larger scale. Training, mentorship, program development. It means giving up field work, and I'm scared, David. Being an operational officer is all I've known for so long. It's who I am. She wiped her eyes. But I met a young lieutenant yesterday. She's going through the same things I went through, facing the same doubts, the same prejudice. And I realized that if I take this position, maybe the next lieutenant after her won't have to. Maybe we can actually fix the system instead of just surviving it. Sarah stood up, touching the cold marble of the headstone. I'm going to take the job. I'm going to try to make a difference in a different way. I think you'd be proud of that choice. As she walked back to her car, Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. The decision was made. Monday morning, she called General Carver and accepted the position. Outstanding, Major, Carver said. We'll get the paperwork started immediately. Welcome aboard. Her next call was to Lieutenant Park. Jessica, this is Major Mitchell. Do you have time to meet for coffee this afternoon? Of course, ma'am, Jessica replied, sounding surprised and pleased. When they met, Sarah shared the news about her new position. I wanted you to know because you're part of the reason I took it, and I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in being part of the program as we develop it. Your perspective as someone currently going through the challenges would be invaluable. Jessica's eyes went wide. You want my help? Ma'am, I'm just a second lieutenant. I barely know what I'm doing. You know more than you think, Sarah said, and fresh eyes are often the most valuable. Will you do it? Yes, ma'am, absolutely. That afternoon, Sarah also did something she hadn't planned on. She went to find Captain Brennan. She located him in one of the base gyms, running on a treadmill. When he saw her, he immediately stopped the machine and came to attention, looking terrified. At ease, Captain, Sarah said. This isn't an official visit. Brennan relaxed slightly but still looked wary. Ma'am, I want to again apologize for... Sarah held up a hand. I know, and your apology was accepted, but I wanted to talk to you about something else. She gestured to a bench, and they both sat. You made assumptions about me based on my gender, Sarah said bluntly. It was wrong and it was unfair, but you're not the first person to do it, and you won't be the last. Brennan looked down at his hands, shame evident on his face. The question is, what are you going to do with this experience? Sarah continued. You can let it humiliate you, or you can let it educate you. I want to learn from it, ma'am, Brennan said quietly. Good, then I have a suggestion. I'm going to be heading up a new training program focused on integrating women into special operations and combat roles. We're going to need officers who can help bridge the cultural gaps. Officers who have had their own biases challenged and come out better for it. Brennan looked up, surprised. Are you asking me to be part of it? I'm asking if you're interested. It would mean confronting your own assumptions, being willing to admit when you're wrong, and helping create an environment where everyone is judged by their abilities, not their gender. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I grew up in a very traditional family. My father was a Marine, my grandfather was a Marine. They had certain ideas about women and the military. I never questioned those ideas, I just accepted them." "And now," Sarah asked, "now I realize that I was wrong, that they were wrong. Not every tradition is worth keeping." He met Sarah's eyes. "If you're willing to give me a chance despite how we met, I'd be honored to be part of the program." Sarah nodded. "I'll be in touch." Over the next several weeks, Sarah began transitioning out of her operational role and into her new position. It was harder than she expected. Saying goodbye to her team, knowing she wouldn't be leading them into the field anymore, felt like losing a part of herself. But as she began working on the new program, developing curriculum, interviewing candidates, and building a vision for what integrated special operations could look like, she felt a different kind of purpose taking root. She was joined by an increasingly diverse team. Lieutenant Park brought the perspective of a junior officer currently facing integration challenges. Sergeant First Class Maria Rodriguez, a combat veteran and military intelligence specialist, brought enlisted insight. And yes, Captain Brennan, who proved to be genuinely committed to change and brought valuable perspective from someone who had undergone a transformation in thinking. They also brought in male officers and NCOs who had successfully led integrated teams, learning from their experiences about what worked and what didn't. 3 months into the program development, Sarah was invited to brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff on their progress. Standing in the Pentagon, presenting to the highest-ranking officers in the military, Sarah thought about how far she had come from that recruiting office in Tennessee. She concluded her presentation with words she had thought about carefully. "The question is not whether women can serve in combat roles. They already have and they already do. The question is whether we as an institution will create the systems and culture to allow them to succeed to their full potential, not by lowering standards but by eliminating irrelevant barriers, not by asking for special treatment but by demanding fair treatment. The military becomes stronger when we utilize all available talent. That's not a political statement. It's a tactical reality." The room was silent when she finished. Then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a 4-star Army general, nodded. "Major Mitchell, this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking leadership we need. You have full support to move forward with implementation." 6 months later, the program officially launched at 3 pilot bases. The media coverage was intense. Sarah did several interviews, always keeping the focus on the mission and the soldiers, not on herself. But one interview stood out. A reporter asked, "Major Mitchell, you're being called a pioneer for women in the military. How does that feel?" Sarah thought about all the women who had come before her. The nurses in World War II, the pilots who flew in non-combat roles in Vietnam, the soldiers who had served with distinction even when official policy said they couldn't. "I'm not a pioneer," Sarah said firmly. "I'm standing on the shoulders of women who fought these battles long before I did, women whose names we don't know, whose sacrifices weren't always recognized. I'm just trying to make sure the next generation doesn't have to fight as hard as we did." The program was not without challenges. There was resistance from some quarters, criticism from others. Some argued the standards were being compromised, others claimed the changes didn't go far enough. But slowly, measurably, things began to change. Female soldiers in the program reported better integration experiences. More of them successfully completed advanced training courses. Command climate surveys showed improving attitudes. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fast, but it was progress. 2 years after that encounter in the parking lot, Sarah was promoted to lieutenant colonel. At her promotion ceremony, attended by family, friends, and colleagues, she looked out at the audience and saw faces that represented her journey. Torres was there, walking with a slight limp but grinning with pride. Lieutenant Park, now a captain, sat in the front row in her dress uniform, wearing the expert infantry badge she had earned. Captain Brennan, who had become one of the program's most effective instructors, stood at attention among the other officers. General Carver, who had recruited Sarah to this new path, was the one who pinned on her new rank. "The military doesn't change easily," he said to her quietly during the ceremony. "It takes leaders who are willing to push, to endure, to sacrifice. You've done that in combat, and you're doing it now in a different way. Well done, Colonel." After the ceremony, Sarah found herself approached by a young woman in civilian clothes, maybe 19 or 20 years old. "Excuse me, Colonel Mitchell. My name is Amy Chen." Sarah's breath caught. "Chen?" "My uncle was Captain David Chen. He was killed in Afghanistan in 2015. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "David was one of the finest officers I ever served with. He gave me my first real chance in special operations." Amy smiled, her eyes also wet. "My family told me to look for you if I ever had the chance. They said Uncle David wrote about you in his letters home, about a young MP who was determined to prove herself." "He believed in me when a lot of people didn't," Sarah said. "I wanted you to know that you're part of the reason I enlisted," Amy said. "I ship to basic training next month, and I'm going to try out for special operations when I'm eligible." Sarah looked at this young woman, standing at the beginning of a journey that Sarah knew would be difficult but potentially extraordinary. "Your uncle would be so proud," Sarah said. "And if you ever need advice, guidance, or just someone to talk to, you call me. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Amy said, standing a little taller. That evening, Sarah returned home to her quiet house. She changed out of her dress uniform and stood in her living room, looking at the photos on the wall. She added a new one from today's ceremony, not of herself, but of the moment when Amy Chen had approached her, a reminder of why this new mission mattered. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Tors. "Congrats, Colonel. You've come a long way from that kid who was too stubborn to quit. Proud to have served with you." She smiled and typed back, "Couldn't have done any of it without you and the team. Thank you for believing in me." As she settled into her favorite chair with a cup of tea, Sarah reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. She had started her military career just wanting to prove she could do the job, wanting to earn respect, wanting to serve her country. Along the way, she had discovered that her mission was bigger than just her own success. It was about opening doors for those who came after. It was about changing a system that needed changing. It was about leadership that served something larger than ego or ambition. The encounter with Captain Brennan in that parking lot, which could have been just another frustrating moment of being underestimated, had instead become a catalyst. It had reminded her that her experience and knowledge could be put to use in a different way. And in the end, perhaps the greatest victory wasn't the missions she had led or the decorations she had earned. It was the young soldiers like Lieutenant Park and Amy Chen who would face fewer barriers because of the work Sarah and others were doing now. That night, Sarah slept better than she had in years. No nightmares of past missions, no anxiety about upcoming operations. Just peace and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her service was making a real difference. The next morning, her phone rang early. It was General Carver. "Colonel Mitchell, sorry to call so early, but I wanted you to be the first to know. The program is being expanded to all service branches, full implementation across the entire military. It's official." Sarah felt a surge of emotion. "Sir, that's incredible." "It's because of the work you and your team have done. You've proven the model works. Now we're scaling it up, and I want you to lead the expansion. Are you in?" Sarah thought about that young woman in Tennessee who had walked into a recruiting office with a dream, who had been told what she couldn't do and decided to do it anyway. "I'm in, sir," Sarah said. "Absolutely." As she ended the call and looked out her window at the sunrise, Colonel Sarah, Elite Mitchell, smiled. The mission was just beginning. And this time, she wasn't fighting alone. She was part of something bigger, something that would outlast her career and her life. She was building a legacy. Not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been told she didn't belong, every soldier who had been underestimated, and every young person who would follow in their footsteps. The road had been long and hard. The battles had cost her in ways that would never fully heal. But standing here now, knowing the impact she was making, Sarah knew that every struggle had been worth it. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And the best part, the story was far from over.